What? It's not working. What? It doesn't work. It doesn't work. I've been scammed. Claude, scam me. Codex, scam me. Joe, you scam me. You likely ran into this the first time you ever tried to vibe code an app or have agents create an app, because the fact of the matter is, if you just give the agents instructions and our bead graph from before, for example, they're still not going to get it perfect. And so we can see here a project that I just gave a bunch of beads, and you can see that, it kind of works, but when you try to click buttons and stuff, we get a problem. We get all these problems, and it doesn't seem to work all that well. That's because it has a bunch of bugs in it that the agent didn't seem to account for. So what do you do when your vibe coding app doesn't work? Well, I'm going to show you. What you do is you close the loop. So in this video, I'm going to briefly cover what closing the loop for agents even means, why it matters. Then I'm going to show you my full workflow for how I close the loop with web applications. So, closing the loop for agents simply means giving the agents the feedback so that they can actually see what they produce. Now, you might be wondering why to do this. Well, it's because of the Samara principle for agents. I don't know if anybody's said this before, or in the exact same way I have, but I'm just naming it the Samara principle for agents because it sounds cool. The Samara principle is the closer agents are to their output, the better the result. And I found this to be true with everything that I've built. The closer I can get the agent to the final output, the closer I can get it to the result, the better the result ends up being. So that's the reason why. Now, in practice, the challenge with this is that giving agents access to your browser is really just not that secure. I know a lot of people do that with OpenClaw, and I would advise them to tread lightly because these agents can make mistakes, they can click the wrong thing, they can get hacked, and so we're not there yet as far as giving them browser access. But then the question is, well, how do you close the loop? I'm going to show you exactly how I close the loop with web applications like the one you saw in the beginning. So what I'm going to do now is I'm in my dev environment. I'm going to add an agent, just like we saw in the last video, using npm add. So what I do to close the loop for web applications is actually very simple and straightforward. I simply use the Playwright CLI. Now, if you're wondering why don't I use the Playwright MCP, it's simply because MCP tends to take up a larger portion of the context window and it doesn't see any market improvement. So that's why I use Playwright CLI instead of the Playwright MCP. So here I'm going to ask my agent, what can you do with the Playwright CLI currently? And so this is a new agent, so it doesn't really know where it is, but it's going to get situated, and then it's going to check out the Playwright CLI tool. So we can do this ourselves manually as well. So I ran this help command, and we can see all the options that are available to the Playwright CLI. Chromium distribution, emulate the color theme, you can emulate a device, and so it can actually, with a web app, it can actually emulate like a phone and see how your web app looks like on a phone, which is pretty cool in my opinion. So yeah, we have our report here. This is much cleaner than looking at the help, and it just says we can open pages in the browser, generate Playwright scripts, take screenshots, that's a big deal, generate PDFs, run a Playwright test, and et cetera, initialize agents and stuff like that. I haven't ever used Playwright agents because I'm pretty sure you have to pay for that. But everything else, like the screenshots, the opening, clicking buttons, all that is really important. And that's what we want. Now that I've shown you what the Playwright CLI can do, and more importantly, what your agents can do with it, I'm going to show you my workflow. And my workflow is very simple. So I have a UX test skill that I created. And what it does is it instructs the agent about how to run tests on web applications with Playwright. So I can scroll through and show you kind of what it does. It talks about awaiting and making sure to not click too many buttons too quickly because the page needs to load, et cetera. So really just helpful things, right? Desktop, these types of things. Anyway, I literally created that skill by asking my agent to create it, and I'll get into skills in a different video. But anyway, I have that skill, and I also have a prompt that instructs the agent to use that skill and perform the tests. So I'm going to go npm list templates to see my list of prompts. Holy, that was the wrong command. npm template That's a little confusing. All right, and so I created this prompt called UX production test, and that's the one that tells it to read that skill. So I'm going to go now is I'm going to go npm send content engine. I'm going to go Codex for this one. We're going to go pane is 2 because that's the second pane, and we're going to go. All right, so this is going to use the template UX production test, and it's going to send it to pane 2 in the content engine project, and it's going to send it. That's kind of how this NTM send command works. And if you're ever curious about NTM, you can always go NTM help and see what it can do. So now I'm going to send this. And actually, I'm going to do this again, but I'm going to send it to pane 1. Because I want to show you what the prompt actually does. Here's the prompt. Go read all of uxtest.md, that skill file I showed you, then follow the instructions to test every aspect of the application until you have tested every single possible user experience permutation. And I have this goal / command there. And then here I have some encouraging wording for it. But basically what this does is it tells the AI to keep going until it's figured out every possible permutation, taken every single screenshot, take screenshots of every page and really scrutinize the UI. So this ends up taking the agents a long time, especially if you have a larger application. But it's really, really, really valuable because it gets the agent to find almost every bug you could find with the UI. So if you recall those problems I was having with this app, right? If I try to create a project, it like tells, could create a project here, and then I'll go to create project, and then it'll have some problem with it. It didn't create the project, see? Yeah, project failed, 401, inspect degraded posture, that doesn't do anything. So you can see how it has very clear problems with clicking the buttons. Well, this workflow that I showed you is going to fix that. So we can see that it's taking some screenshots already, and it's naming them, the PNGs, it's viewing the images and rewriting the code. So you can already see how it's running these tests automatically. Is this test absolutely 100% perfect and can guarantee that you're never going to have a bug again after this? Of course not. But it saves you a lot of time debugging things manually. Because if you were to try to debug it manually, you would have to go, this button is not working. You would have to tell your agent that, and then the agent would fix it, you'd test it again, and you'd flip-flop back and forth. What this does is it kind of closes the loop, like we were talking about earlier, and now the agent can run its own tests, and if there's an error afterward, it can find that immediately, test it again, rewrite the code, and repeat until it can get rid of those bugs. So that's a clear example of how closing the loop is much more valuable than trying to have the agent write code and then you debug it. All right, so it achieved the goal in 1 hour and 17 minutes. And we can see that it changed all these TypeScript files. It read the Markdown file and it gives us a summary of some of the changes that it made. It took a whole bunch of screenshots. So it did a lot of work in that 77 minutes. So now I'm going to tell it to push the changes. So I'm going to send the fresh review prompt to this agent just so it kind of checks over its own work. That's always a really good idea to send an agent after it's done coding. It's super easy and it can get a lot of the low-hanging fruit and the bugs and errors that these agents can make. So very high ROI prompt to send. All right, so it finished that one pass and I told it to give me a summary of what you changed by doing that pass. So we can see it changed the auth pass keys, and that was what we were having trouble with in the beginning of the video that you saw. It did the creator UX fixes, public login gate. So you can see it did a lot of like stuff under the hood that you would run into if you were trying to use this thing. It didn't do a lot with like the UI stuff, but that's kind of to be expected because a lot of times these LLMs are not too good at judging what the UI is good for. If you want an LLM to be really good at judging UI, you honestly kind of want a vision language model rather than one that just reads the screenshots. It would actually see like a recording and be able to process that. And that's a lot better for that sort of thing. At some point, I will set up my agents so that they can do UI really well and they'll have references and stuff like that. But I don't do too many front-facing things that I need to do that yet. Another thing that I want to point out is to not overcomplicate this. right? Like it did a ton of work. It worked for, an hour and 14 minutes, which was after it worked for an hour and 17 minutes. So that's like 2.5 hours just from that one skill and the Playwright CLI. So I see a lot of people will install these software products that are like, look, this is this special like software that you can use to test out your product. But really, the Playwright CLI does plenty. You don't need to spend money on extra products. The Playwright CLI is pretty good when you give it to these agents, and they're really good at using it. And so all you need to do then is give it a skill file where you tell it to click through all the entire buttons and use that one skill to go through, which you saw me do earlier. I'll attach the skill in the description as well so that you can use it for your workflow. You're welcome. Also, 2.5 hours might not sound like a lot, but when I've run these on actual apps that I'm building, like I've literally had it run for 9 hours just pursuing that goal. Like I queue it up with the goal/command and it'll pursue that for like 9.5 hours last time I tried this out. And then of course you have it check its work again with the fresh eyes prompt. So you can have it going for a really long time. It'll just go through and do everything you ask. So there we have it. That's really all it takes to close the loop, right? Closing the loop is really important. It'll get your agents to catch a lot of things that they would have otherwise normally not seen. Yeah, it gets you a whole bunch of testing just for free, so you don't have to do it yourself. So it can save you a ton of time and really make your apps a lot better. And as you saw, like all we needed was a well-written skill file, a prompt, and the Playwright CLI. That's all it takes. Don't overcomplicate it, and your apps will be way better, and you'll spend a lot less time struggling with vibe-coded apps that aren't what you expected and don't really work out of the box. So that's all for right now. I will attach the skill that I use in the description below so that you can just use it for yourself. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments, and happy coding.